Yeah, this is obviously, if you don't know what's going on here, I'm not sure how you got here, but yeah, welcome to another JRI Fireside Chat. Obviously, this is Managing Director Scott Macmillan of Invictus Energy with us today. As you are no doubt aware, Invictus is and remains one of the most hotly followed resource stocks on the ASX these days, and is just agonizingly close to getting to that discovery that everyone has been waiting on. I just want to welcome Jamie Vinnels. He's going to be my co-pilot here today again, rather. I'll be passing off the more technical components to him, as it is his profession. Standard disclaimers, forward-looking statements, blue sky, et cetera, right? This is not financial advice. Make sure that you have your own financial advisor, and I'll make sure I'll have the full disclaimer in the notes below. Reminder, if you haven't noticed, this is being recorded, so act accordingly, right? And the recording will hopefully be up within 24 hours of here. And again, I think I've said this again, I'm number 6 on the way to 48. Mics off and cameras off, please. And if you do have burning questions, type them into the chat bar. No guarantees, as you know, that these are usually a fairly lengthy affair. And the whole point of this is that every single question that you'll hear tonight is already an investor question. But if you've just got something you just have to get off your chest, put it into the chat bar, and if it fits the verb, fits the flow, maybe we'll try to dovetail it in. And I want to, this is just a moment of appreciation for Scott's time here, right? I mean, that webinar at 2 a.m. Zimbabwe time, I think, is also indicative of the sort of approach he has for his stakeholders. And I just, let us, before we get into the juicy parts, into the meaty bits here, right? Just an appreciation of his time and good faith that he actually stands here and engages with us. There's been a lot of conflicting views being shared on hot copper and here and elsewhere, but I just know that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Turn off your audio, please. Okay. And so, there it is already. So this is an opportunity for us to learn from Scott, right? This is not an outlet for emotions, to take out emotions on him or whoever you want to, but this is an opportunity for you for us to learn directly straight from the source, right? So anyway, with that agonizing beginning out of the way, Scott, thank you. And how are you today? Where are you?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, Matt, and Jamie for co-hosting. I'm back in Perth for the moment, and look, from I guess from last week's webinar, you've got some shareholders that still have questions. That's understandable, and I think we've got a very, very wide audience of shareholders. We've got over 10,000 shareholders now, which is the company's grown enormously from that perspective. But I think we can't satisfy everyone with our announcement styles and what we disclose. So sometimes you've got to take people to church, and sometimes you've got to take them to the nightclub. So this is probably more the nightclub version of of the announcement sort of styles and webinars, rather than an official company one. So these fireside chats are a good way to get across some questions from shareholders that we don't have an opportunity really to delve into in a kind of company hosted webinar. So thanks again for hosting this.
Yeah, no, and thank you for being here. And like I say, we'll be buckling in for about 2 hours here. So yeah, maybe we all took our bathroom breaks ahead of time here. Anyway, so why don't we? Let's just get into it, right? We obviously, everyone here wants to talk about Mukuyu-2, the sidetrack, the past, present, and future of that. But I think that there was just a little bit of almost kind of table setting or conversation just around previous data and what that looks like, and maybe what we might expect. And so I guess, again, just simple question to start is there any update on the information from Mukuyu-1 and when we might be expecting that?
So as far as I know from speaking to the petrophysics team, that we've still got some saturation data waiting on from the lab, and we've kind of left that alone for the moment because we're busy with ops. So the data, I think some of it's come in, some of it's still outstanding, but we haven't had a chance to work it in and integrate it yet, because you've got to do all of your saturation height functions, your capillary pressure modeling, and that's very hard with a couple of plugs, to be honest. So it's kind of been parked for now, and we've really focused on the ops on Mukuyu-2.
And so, just to clarify, that is something that we can expect, but just not at the moment. Your attention's obviously elsewhere.
That's right. I think we're pretty busy and fully focused on actual operations rather than kind of lab data that's making its way to us and still in progress.
And just for the sake of, again, just clarification, will that include potential net pay calculations or preliminary net pay?
So it will, and what will greatly assist that is the data from Mukuyu-1. So we've planning to get an upsized data set from Mukuyu-1 from a wireline perspective, from logs. We've also got now a full suite of mud gas data, and that goes from the Dandy right at the top all the way down to TD, whereas previously we only had the Upper Angua isotube data. So that's going to greatly help us. So we've got a much bigger data set now that we're planning on integrating. So all of these pieces of the puzzle that you put together help you. You don't just have one answer from Mukuyu-1 and then that's it. You've got to use all of the data that you can to try and refine it.
So maybe
but from a net pay, probably a good topic, because I had a lot of emails, a lot of text messages on net pay. So net pay is not a static thing. So you've got, particularly where we are in a frontier basin, where this is only the second well that's been drilled. We've got one offset well with very limited data set. So net pay is a combination of a few things. You've got your net to gross, so your sand versus shale ratio in your formation. You've got porosity, you've got gas saturation, and then you've also got permeability and relative permeability as well on top of that. So those combination of things all make up your net pay. And so the cutoffs that you use that apply in one basin don't necessarily apply to another, because you've got, particularly for something like porosity and permeability, where you've got a wide, sometimes orders of magnitude difference in permeability for a given porosity. And we see that in our rocks here as well. And we could see that from the formation pressure data. So when we're calculating it, we need to, and the net pay numbers that we're going to put out are going to be very conservative from where we start, because we don't know where this basin sits in terms of net and each of these packages. And when you take your petrophysical logs, those are a kind of static view of the rock. Over production time, you're going to have some of the lower perm stuff and low porosity stuff contribute as well. So typically you see that stuff come in later, but it depends on where it is in space for your rocks as well. If it's an isolated package, probably not. If it's integrated or interbedded rather with some of your better perm rock and high quality rock, then that's going to contribute over time as you can apply drawdowns over the sand face rather than a tiny little plug or probe that you're measuring it with currently. So net pay is a complicated thing, and it's ever evolving as you get more and more data. So
no, and fair, and I think that's the sort of detail that people are wanting to hear, right? Maybe this is maybe more of a granular question, but just
I have a whole thing of this. I need to find
please, yeah, Kelly. All right, I think that next time we'll have to just no more the boys in the chat. We'll have to just bypass that anyway. So a question, this is more granular, but just around the sidewall core samples that you did get out of the ground. I mean, are they in good condition? Was there any concerns about their usability in terms of analysis?
Yeah, there were some in some of the reservoir plugs. They're fractured, so it just means that it limits what you can do with them from and depending on where the fracture is and its orientation, sometimes you can't even get reliable poroperm measurements out of them. So we only cut 25, I think, 23, 24, 25, something like that in Mukuyu-1. Most of them were focused on the shale sections, because you're trying to get information on the source rock maturity, some palynology and age dating, because that helps calibrate our basin model. And I think we only had maybe 8 or 9 reservoir samples out of 1,000-meter interval. And some of that included the pebbly arcos as well. So it's and if you think of eight plugs that are that sort of big, trying to characterize a lot of reservoir, it's not really representative of it. So at some stage, we're going to go and cut whole core in these, which will then give you a much better picture of what the reservoir properties are.
Do you mean conventional core?
Yeah, conventional core, whole core. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
and then you sample that in the lab, and you can cut them.
Yeah.
Typically, you cut them every 30 centimeters. You do poropermeometry over them every, whatever interval you like, to get a really tight understanding of what the porosity and permeability relationship is, and what the rock properties are. So, and the depositional environment and everything else. It's trying to look at it from a core plug perspective versus what we're looking at a reservoir perspective is a very minute view.
Thank you, Scott. I think that now, if you don't mind, I'm going to transition from the very granular to the very macro. And this is a question that a lot of people have had, but a very repetitive question, not repetitive, but a question that repeated itself a lot coming in for me as a request, was more of on a philosophical level. Do you mind just explaining your approach to data publication and news releases? This was one of those things where, if anybody has read any sort of investor responses, there's a lot of emotion regarding your approach to releasing news. Some people suggest maybe you're tight to the vest, or you're keeping data behind the veil. And this, do you want to explain why you chose to execute in this fashion? And maybe not, and yeah, just I'll just stop there. And do you want to provide some color just to explain the rationale behind that?
Sure. Look, I think we publish a lot more information than most companies do. To be honest, from if you look at our last few announcements, we told people exactly what happened from an operations perspective. A lot of other companies would just put out a very very basic statement saying, we've got to this point, and now we're doing this, rather than kind of going into how the operations unfolded and what happened and the decisions that we made. So I think we do disclose probably a lot more, and that's what's caused, I think, a lot of a lot more questions to subsequently be published from a data publication perspective. We put out a print of the cleanup on one of those stations. I don't think I've ever seen a company release that before. We published all of our top structure maps from a seismic point of view. The only thing we haven't put out so far is log data, and that's what we're drilling these wells for, is to go and get data to evaluate it. And we spend tens of millions of dollars doing it, and we're not just going to put it out in the public domain and release it into the wild, because that's what that's what we're going to get, and that's what maintains our competitive advantage. And so I know there are a lot of amateur and professional petrophysicists out there that would love to go and interrogate our data so they could do their own evaluation, but it's not that common for companies to release all of that data into the wild, particularly in a very early stage in the basin. So,
just as a follow-up, or again, just on a more philosophical level, would you, if you could go back with the knowledge you have now in terms of managing expectations and however you conduct yourself in the public eye from an IR perspective, would you change anything that you've done or any decisions you made along the way?
Look, I don't think so. I've always believed that, and why we write our announcements in detail. I saw someone yesterday, and he was asking how it was going, and I kind of recapped the previous announcement of what happened, and he's like, "Why did you put all of that out there?" He said, "I wouldn't have told anyone what had happened." But what we're doing is hard. This is a frontier drilling in a remote location is very, very difficult. And I think people forget that sometimes. And a lot of people, got a lot of shareholders that are professionals in the industry that have drilled a lot of wells, but they've had the benefit of doing it with a lot of other offset wells around them. And so it's easier to put data and information in context, because you've got a reference point to other wells in the basin and results. So you're able to get your mind and wrap your head around the results a little bit easier. Whereas we've still got a huge uncertainty range on our data because of the limited amount of wells and data that we've had. So we can't put it in black and white in our announcements. And I think we do put a healthy amount of health warnings on our data to say, look, this is what the data has said, and this is our interpretation so far. But we can't, we're not as definitive, I think, as other companies, because we can't be at the moment, because it is a dynamic situation. As we gather more data, we fill in more pieces of the puzzle. So I think we disclose, more than enough data for everyone, and probably more information than I think is needed. And perhaps if we simplify things and probably tone it back a bit, then it would cause less angst, I think, than us giving a warts and all account of like what's been going on operationally whilst we're drilling. It's that might not lead to as much bedwetting that's been going on.
Well, I think you've almost kind of you've anticipated. I mean, that's just something that I feel that you are very forthcoming in a way that not many companies are when things don't go well. And I think people are maybe it's just a matter of having to become comfortable with the discomfort of wildcatting and true frontier exploration. But people want the flip side of that too, right? Where they have that opportunity to toot the horn too, right? But no, I don't know. I can name another managing director that does a 2 a.m. webinar, so I won't. I'm not going to fault you too hard on that one. That's a good look. I think that I'll stop here. We'll get directly into the technical stuff here, and Jamie, my resident petroleum geologist, my friend here, he's gonna take over for us, and so we can make sure that the right questions are asked in the right way here, Jamie.
Yeah, I wanted to start on the seismic. So, have the well tops and the kind of depth and thickness prognoses been pretty accurate with M2 so far?
Yeah, they have. Again, John, our geophysicist, and we've got some of the processing team behind that as well, have done a fantastic job. I think the lower Angler came in 2.8 meters low to prognosis. I mean, it's a ridiculous. Yeah, I told him it was pretty sloppy. That he was 2.8 meters up, from sort of 3,000 meters below the surface. But there's probably a little bit of, because where we transitioned from Pebliarcos to Upper Angler compared to Mukuyu-1, we've seen a little bit of a change in the depositional environment. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty there, and probably looking back at Mukuyu-1 as well. But we've got some chemostrack work underway that will hopefully provide us with that definition of where we transition from, between those units, and give us a bit more certainty on that pick. But it's been very, very tight. A phenomenal job for a frontier basin. So,
have you encountered any kind of repeated sequences, or there's a fair amount of faulting in the section?
We do. We think we can see some correlation between Mukuyu-1 and Mukuyu-2 in terms of some of the sequences there. Lower Angler, obviously, we haven't penetrated before until this well, so that's all brand new.
Okay. At this stage, you're able to talk about which logs you have acquired in M2 so far, the wireline and the LWD.
Sure. So from an LWD perspective, we had resistivity and gamma ray. So pretty basic tool suite, and that's really to help guide us with picking casing depths and making a real time drilling decision as to when we TD, particularly if you start to see when you're going through sands, but the resistivity tailing off and indicating it's water bearing. So you don't want to carry on pushing too deep into the water leg and not you're not wasting your time, but the return on investment from rig time perspective is low. It's good to tag water legs if you can find them, but we haven't seen any yet in the upper angler and lower angler. So that helps us make decisions about when we're TDing. So, if your water leg comes in 200 meters above your TD point, then you've got to make a decision and say, oh, is it worth persisting all the way to TD just to intersect more water? But that hasn't happened. From a wireline perspective, we have the normal quad combo data, so gamma ray, resistivity, density, and neutron, and FMI as well on this. We don't have coverage and sonic as well to help calibrate the seismic. We don't have coverage all the way to the bottom for those because we had some issues with restrictions in the borehole. So we ran some of them first, and we didn't want to put the nuclear tools in the hole first. So we ran FMI and sonic first and couldn't get all the way to the bottom. We did that wiper trip. We disclosed that in the information in the announcement a few weeks ago. We've got pressure data, and we've got we've got some cleanup data from some of the fluids. We've got a water sample from the Pebbly Arcos, and we tried to run the CMR, but that tool failed. We finally got an answer why last night from our service providers. So it was just a sequencing thing, but that's ready to go. We've got those tools ready to go in the in the sidetrack hole section. So we've got a good data set, but it's not complete, and we don't have VSP data, and we don't have Sidewall cores yet. So Sidewall cores are pretty crucial for this next for this well and calibrating.
I guess you do the VSP at the end.
Yeah, typically you do. So
yeah. I remember last time we talked about the NMR log. Were you able to use an NMR tool? To look at permeability, for example.
Yeah, as we said, we had planned to run that and planned to run it prior to sampling to give us a better handle on our porosity and permeability relationship, because that provides you an independent assessment of it compared to your other wireline tools. But it didn't. It failed. We tried to run it twice, and it didn't work. So now they've done an investigation and found out why, and it was just a firing sequence thing of how they initiate the tool when it's working. There was some conjecture that it was due to borehole environment and filter cake and salinity, but it was all well within the tool parameters. But they've sorted it out now, so it should be good to go for the next run.
Cool. I think you've already touched on the rock properties that you can talk about. We really are waiting for that calibration, I guess. You mentioned pressure data. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how much pressure data you've got? Is it just from the Pebbly Arcos, or is it from the whole stack?
No, it's from the whole stack and from the lower angler, upper angler, and Pebbly Arcos. So we've got, as we said in the Pebbly Arcos, we got a water gradient through there, but we do have residual gas in that reservoir, which is shown in the saturation logs. So by residual gas, I mean gas that's present in the pore space, but at a lower concentration that's below your net pay cutoff. So that means that although you've got gas in the rocks, it's not the mobile phase, as it's called, the fluid that occupies the internal bit of the pore space, not the external coating the grains bit. So when we calculated it, sometimes your logs are a little sensitive to residual gas. You can kind of make that come and go. But when we went into to sample for water, which we need to calibrate the resistivity so that we can calculate that gas saturation, that's the primary thing that we use it for. We were expecting just to get some water, but we did recover that natural gas along with it, which was a really pleasant surprise. So that means two things. One, obviously, there's gas in the system, but two, that the logs and the log calculations that we have showing that we have gas saturation at a lower. and again, this is where I'm coming to net cutoffs, where we're starting to move gas from a relatively small volume of water somewhere else. That net cutoff is going to slide, probably include some of that in some parts of the Pebbly Arcos, depending on where it sits. So when we recovered that gas, it means that the gas saturation that we're calculating in the upper and the lower Angler beneath that, which we're calculating as live gas, which means it's above that netback cutoff, and is the mobile phase, that's a very important calibration point. So I think the significance of that was missed by the market. So we've got pressure data through the Pebbly Arcos, we've got in the upper Angler gas legs, and then we've got in the lower Angler as well, where we see that overpressure kick in at sort of 3,400. So we've got some other reservoirs in the lower Angler above that that are on a lower pressure gradient. So I think we've obviously got some vertical compartmentalization in the lower Angler, where we see a shale through there that's got some overpressure beneath that. So we've got gas from the pressures. We've got gas in the upper Angler reservoirs and in the lower Angler, and water-bearing reservoirs in the Pebbly Arcos, but with residual gas in it that we're seeing.
And that's all thermogenic gas, not biogenic.
It is thermogenic. So as you can see from the composition that we published, there are some heavier ends in that as well. It's a little bit probably lighter in terms of its liquid yield, but some of that may have dropped out in the actual water sample when they were blowing it down. So when you change the pressure and temperature of hydrocarbon fluids, the gas comes out of solution and the liquids drop out. So once that sample goes off for analysis at the labs, we'll see if there's any of the heavier hydrocarbons in there, sort of C5 plus. And our well site conditions as well. I mean, you often refer to gas at standard conditions, which is 25 degrees Celsius and atmospheric pressure. Our standard conditions at the well site are about 48 degrees Celsius and just above atmospheric pressure. So that's going to change. That's going to change your kind of liquid yield versus gas yield, and some of those things would have dropped out already.
Have you seen
but again,
any...
we've got with the isotope data that we'll get from the isotubes from the mud gas, we'll be able to track that and see if those gases are related as well in the Pebbly Arcos and the upper Angler and the lower Angler, or whether they come in the Pebbly Arcos from a separate source rock that may be lighter in terms of its composition.
Have you seen any fluid contacts at all?
No, not that we've interpreted so far. We haven't seen any fluid contacts.
It is encouraging you're seeing the C5 stuff, because means there's oil somewhere, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think we've always said this, that the source rock is capable of generating both oil and gas. And we've seen the heavier ends, and we started to see increasing heavier ends as we got deeper. I haven't looked at the ratios, and to be honest, that's not really our focus at the moment. It's just getting a representative fluid sample from the reservoirs rather than mud gas. That mud gas analysis and isotopes and everything else will all come later on. What we're primarily interested in is fluid samples from the reservoir rather than that's liberated when you're drilling. So that'll come. But there's definitely liquids around in the basin for sure, from what we've seen. And we saw, perhaps in Mukuyu-1, we did see a difference in where we were on the original wellbore versus the sidetrack, which was a little bit up dip, and we saw the sidetrack was actually a little bit drier than the motherboard, which was down dip from that, and perhaps we tagged a little contact through there in one of those reservoirs. I'm talking about a gas oil contact in one of those reservoirs. So we've seen looking so far at the data, and again, it's just still early and still subject to all of the analysis, but just eyeballing it, it's a little bit drier up dip here. And perhaps that's because we've got more charge coming from the north where the depot center is, where it's, the basin gets down to sort of 12 to 16 kilometers in thickness. And that means it's where the source rock is buried. As it thickens, it's more mature, it's hotter temperature and produces drier gas compared to where we were. But again, we've got multiple source rock sequences in this basin, and the charge history is really complicated, and I doubt it's ever going to be solved. I think
are those source rocks coal kind of things, or are they more like kind of like lacusstrine shales? Like
we've got a real
lakes. Okay.
Yeah, we've got a real mixture where we've got coals, we've got lacusstrine, where we see some bacterial influence in some of the source rock, which is giving it that more liquid signature. And in fact, some of it's almost tending towards like marine type signature, although we're not in a marine environment here. But it's just the richness of that source rock. Some of it's humic, which is kind of your typical swampy, coaly landmass stuff. So it is a real mixture. And as the source rock gets deposited and gets buried deeper, it goes through that thermal maturity phase where it's going from liquids through to gas. But you've got multiple ones of these all moving through. So it is a really complicated charge story, but it's a good problem to have, because you've got lots of source rock and you're not just reliant on one particular interval, and some of it's self-sourcing and some of the units through it. So it's I doubt it'll ever be solved, to be honest, because we've got a lot of it, so many reservoirs trying to get that calibration of your structural timing and burial and liberation and charge is really hard.
Do you have a palynologist or a bug guy or girl on site?
No, we don't. And we sent all the cuttings off to have a look at the pally. The palynology is very, very sparse. So that's why we're going to chemostrat from an age dating perspective, to try and get some better insight into how old these sequences are, because that'll help calibrate our basin model and all of the charge story and history.
So you are looking at the TOC and the hydrogen index and stuff like that, like the richness of the source rock.
All of that. So, yeah.
We had a lot of the world experts in salinity measurement come out the last few weeks. There's been a lot of discussion on, salinity and calibrating, pay versus water.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to do any of that work on site? Can you determine salinity kind of where you are, or does it have to go to a lab? And if so, where is? Sorry.
Yeah. So with water sampling, we did dope the mud with a tracer, sodium thiocyanate, which you use, and so when you're drilling, that gets alongside with the filtrate, goes into the rock. So you take a measurement of it whilst you're drilling, and just after you've drilled, and then after you've sampled, so that you can see what the difference is between what the concentration inside your wellbore and in the filtrate is versus what you've gathered from your reservoir sample. So we've done that, and we've got a salinity measurement as well from the Bibliarco's water sample. So there are some discrepancies between the two, the tracer concentration that we see and the salinity that we've measured, and the ratios of that. So it's gone off to the lab now to get a better handle on the tracer concentration that we measured at the well site. But the salinity, it's a pretty standard measurement that you do at the well site with a little resistivity meter. So
okay.
I think also just going a little bit deeper into that topic, and one of the reasons that we I think are in this situation in the first place is because we encountered overpressure gas in the lower Angua, and we had to weight up the mud to control the well. And we saw connection gas. So, we were probably right on. So we executed the first 3,400 meters of this well exactly according to plan. Mud weight was correct. The well design was good. But when we encountered that overpressure gas, which gradually got higher and higher as we got deeper, and we had gas seeping into the wellbore, we had to take action to control the well. Otherwise, it would have ended in a disaster. And you can't, from a safety perspective, from a life and property perspective, that's not something that you take very lightly. So when we had to weight up the mud probably an extra 1.5 pounds per gallon compared to what we had designed it for. And so that meant at the top of the hole, at the Pebbly Arcos, we were quite a long way overweight. And in those reservoir sands, we had that differential sticking issue that was then caused. You start to wash out all of the coals. When we then went in to do the wireline logging on the first run, when we had that hang up towards the bottom of the hole in the lower Angua, we went in to do a wiper trip, and we had a huge amount of trip gas that had built up just in a day and a half from when we did that. So we had to weight up the mud again. You cause more invasion, and it's just a perpetuating and cascading series of consequences that happens from there. So then when we went to do the wireline sampling for fluid sampling, we started with the gas, but as we were cleaning up, we saw the cable head tension start to drop, which means that you don't have the full tension and the weight of the string that's reflecting in the at the cable head of the tool that's hanging beneath it. So we knew the cable was getting stuck, and so we pulled off, and we had 17,000 pounds of overpull, which is right at the very limit of what that wireline unit can pull. So if we'd left it any longer, we definitely would have been stuck, and we would have been fishing. And everyone says, "Oh, just leave it on the wall," but the cable was stuck. So if the cable gets stuck, then you've got a cut and thread job, which is, for those who've done it, it's really ugly, really cumbersome. No guarantees of retrieving the tool either. So you end up in a kind of in the worst of both worlds, where you have a long and frustrating operation to recover it, but sometimes you're not going to get there. So we decided to then go on pipe to complete that logging job. A couple of wiper trips later, again causing more invasion. When we cleaned up that wireline sample, which we were able to do because it's above that differential sticking interval, we pumped out 200 liters of formation water and filtrate, trying to clean up, and we still didn't get all the way there from a contamination point of view, which we can see, but we've got the tracer now to back it out, so it's not that crucial. That's why we ran the tracer, so you don't have to achieve 100% cleanup. You can just back it out. So if you think of a probe that is sort of that size, and you pump 200 liters through it from the pore space, which I think in that Pebbly Arcos we've got in that where we sampled from, we've probably got somewhere in the realms of 18 to 20% porosity. So if you think of a probe trying to pull that amount of fluid out from that sort of space, it's a huge depth of invasion that we've had into the formation to clean it up. So with all of that overpressure that caused us to do that, it meant that we've compromised all of the stuff above where that overpressure is from a sampling point of view. And we saw that then with with the differential sticking that we had, the borehole conditions. So that was the part of the decision that we made to sidetrack, was to do this then at the appropriate mud weight as we'd initially planned, stop before we get to the overpressure, complete the logging job, and we should be away. And we've seen from all the data that we've got so far, we've got gas in the upper and the lower Angua in multiple reservoirs, and now we just have to go finish the job and get a sample and get it done. So it's been hugely frustrating that we executed according to plan. We got caught out by the lower Angua, and I think people are missing the point that it is overpressure gas that we encountered that we had to wait up for. So whilst it's caused issues later on down the track, it's a good problem to have. Overpressured gas does complicate what we've done now, but we can design our wells in the future to mitigate that, because we know we're going to encounter it in the future. So,
you think there's a better alternative location to test the lower Angler other than in M2? Because I know you talked before about coming back later, drilling a 7-inch hole, running 7-inch casing and looking at it later. Or would it be better to handle the lower Angler somewhere else, perhaps?
no, so the plan that we've come up with now is really to allow us to get part of the way into the lower Angler before we get to that overpressured zone, and will allow us to sample some of the reservoirs in the lower Angler. We can then run the 7-inch liner and be able to drill out in 6-inch hole. That'll reset our mud weight to something more. You can start again with your mud weight to something more appropriate for that zone. So that gives us the ability then to still go and evaluate that, still test it, and we can probably do that in open hole in the future, alongside a future test with the zone that we've isolated with the 7-inch liner. So it still gives us that ability to do that. So this location is fine to evaluate that with the plan that we've got at the moment.
I'll just hand over to Matthew, I think, to get into more specifics on the sidetrack itself.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, thank you. Lots of excellent details so far, Scott. Obviously, people are wanting to know just as much as we can, obviously within the realm of legal material disclosure, right? But again, I have these specific questions and these granular, detailed questions that people want to ask. But again, more from that 30,000 foot view at this sidetrack. I think you've already touched on this a little bit in terms of the problems that you're encountering with your mud weight and why and how. But can you just explain? Maybe it is just that gory detail, like the domino effect or that cascading effect that you talked about. But can you maybe again set up the issues that you have encountered? And then also maybe more to the core focus of my question here is what mitigating measures have been put in place to decrease the operational issues or the challenges that we have seen in previous penetrations.
Sure. So with the sidetrack, obviously we've got a good data set to go on from the original wellbore, particularly pressure. So we know what mud weight we need to use that's appropriate for this plan hole section that we're going to drill. Secondly, it's going to be a vertical sidetrack. So from an execution point of view, much, much easier. When we sidetracked Mukuyu-1, we were sidetracking up dip, and we were already highly deviated at sort of 33 degrees. So we had to build angle immediately, which is always harder than letting it drop. So with Mukuyu-1, after we plugged it back to the shoe and we tried to kick off, it took us 4 attempts over 10 days before we successfully kicked off. So with Mukuyu-2, we did it within 24 hours and on the first attempt. So already there's been improvements there. From a design point of view, obviously having a more vertical well means your differential sticking problems are going to be reduced, because your cable's not going to be lying even though it's only 12 degrees, you are still going to get cable that lies on the low side of the hole when you're stationary for a long period of time, which is where you typically get differential sticking or what's called key seating, where the cable will rub along one particular path as you're running in and out of the hole and cut into the formation and cut away that filter cake. And then if you've got overbalance in the hole, it'll stick that cable into that groove that you've cut on the side of the borehole. So going vertical will minimize that. I think we've also ordered. We've brought in some more external groups now, very experienced group out of the UK who've done all of Tullow's work in the Lockachar. Tullow had these problems with their wells, and the first 6 out of 7 wells that they drilled, they ended up fishing their wireline tools. So then they ran these wireline standoffs. So they're little devices that you attach onto the wireline cable as you run it in the hole, that basically are standoffs from that keep the cable central in the borehole. And so you run them, whatever interval they kind of figure out to keep the cable central in the borehole to stop it from getting stuck against the borehole wall. So they went from fishing 6 out of 7 wells to 0 in the future. So we brought those into, because ideally you want to do this on wireline because it is much easier, much more nimble, much quicker. Pipe conveyed logging is a real hassle. I won't use any foul language on here, but it's it's not fun. I mean, it takes you a long time to set everything up on pipe versus wireline. It takes a long time to run in the hole. Probably from where we are, it's about 18 hours from when we start after we've done the tool checks to running in the hole. And then you've got the risk of the wet connect as well, where you're hooking up the wireline cable to the tools once you've run it down to the shoe, and that operation isn't always successful. So we've been lucky; we've done it 5 times probably over the 2 wells so far, and it's worked every time. Fortunately, that's down to a good crew and good procedures, but you don't always get lucky, and you're basically trying to shove the cable head of the wireline tool down the inside of the drill pipe to stab in, so you get the electrical communications and hydraulic communications with the tool from the surface. So that's all risky with pipe, and why you kind of use pipe conveyed logging really sparingly, and only do it if you really have to. So you'll take a risk kind of weighted decision as to whether you go on wire, or continue on wire or pipe, but it's always a difficult decision going on pipe because of the implications, and everything just takes much longer. And if you have any problems, tripping out to the surface and checking stuff is cumbersome. So there have been we're putting in place all of the measures to really avoid having to run anything on pipe, because wireline is the best way to do it from all aspects.
Thank you. No, and I think maybe just as a natural sort of 30,000-foot follow-up. So, in your estimation, then, what is the primary geological risk remaining that might prevent success here on this M2 sidetrack? And then, so that's part A, and part B is what are you doing to mitigate that then?
So, I think that from a geological perspective, it's probably related to the coals and the washouts that we get. Which causes little ledges and hang-ups when you're trying to run in the hole and the tools get stuck. So if you're at a slight angle, and it's easier on wire because the tool can dangle and it can kind of find the natural path in the borehole. But when you're on pipe and it's rigid and you're trying to push it against the side, if you've just got a little ledge, and we had an example of one of them where you could see a washout, which was pretty large, that just sticks in the side, and you're just not going to get past that restriction. And so if you try to force it down, you're going to break the tools. And we had that with some of the sampling tools when we did the pipe conveyed logging, where we damaged them running in the hole because of these washouts where they get caught up and punctured. So that's why we've made these changes for the sidetrack, and we probably learned a bit more now as well about well design for future wells. I think the FMI has also been a really useful data set for us that we didn't have in Mukuyu-1. Some drilling induced fractures that we saw, which we're taking care of now through controlled drilling with Mukuyu-2 as well, and we should see some improvement through that too.
Yeah, no, okay. And so I guess I wanted to ask a follow-up one, but
then further to geological risk, what I think is probably a greater risk than that is just equipment. from a drilling perspective, wireline perspective, it's hard out there. There's a global shortage of tools. If something goes wrong, mobilizing stuff takes a lot of time, and so you've got to make do with what you have. We can't have everything under the sun sitting there as contingency. One, because it's not available. Two, because the wells would end up costing, many times more. And it's the services that cost us money. It's not the rig. It's the service and the equipment sitting on rental there that costs all the money, and the logistics and the mobilization of it that costs all the money for us. The rig is pretty cheap from a spread rate. So spread rate's your overall cost. The rig is one of the cheapest components of it. So it's all well and good saying, well, why don't you have more on standby? We just can't, because they don't have the tools available. And we're moving stuff from the Gulf of Mexico, from Aberdeen, from Dubai, to try and just get a basic suite together. And when there's so much activity in the region, you've got 2 rigs operating for Total in Namibia, 1 for Shell, 1 for Galp. That's just in Namibia. You've got Angola. You've got some development drilling in Mozambique going on at the moment. So it is there's a shortage of tools at the moment, particularly for the high-end stuff that we have for this well. So that's another reason why I think continuing in the Mukuyu-2 original wellbore, where we had these problems, doing the same thing again and expecting a different result was asking for trouble. And we were probably looking at the condition when we went in to set the plugs. I think we were very close to probably getting into real difficulties with that borehole, given it being open for 5 weeks. Mm-hmm. One more thing we've changed not only the mud weight, but a little bit of the mud chemistry as well. So that's also happened on the fly.
So a couple that this one actually came from the audience. This is a nice quick one. You just referenced borehole conditions of M1, obviously after 5 weeks deteriorating. What would you rank the simple out of 10, right? Classic out of 10 question. How would you rank borehole conditions for M2 thus far at this point?
Well, for the sidetrack, fine so far, because you only just started drilling it. So you don't just start sidetrack immediately. You've got to go and plug back and do all your secure the original borehole. So that process takes, depending on how many, and we've got to set a lot of plugs because of all of the zones that we have. So it takes a bit of time. So we only started drilling out over the weekend. So it's still, borehole's still fine. And most of the borehole in Mukuyu-2 is in good condition. It's just those zones where we have those coaly sections, and because of the high mud weight that we had to up, you start to wash those out, and then the wiper trips that we had to do exacerbate that when you're going in and removing the filter cake, circulating, and we had to circulate the trip gas out of the hole as well a number of times. So that's also contributed to that breakdown of those sections.
I'm getting off my finely tuned script here. So this is if I get lost in a few minutes, you'll be my own damn fault. But I can't help but ask. I think this is one that people just want clarification on. What would you have? And then I'm jumping ahead here. I know off of where we are, but getting into the lower Angua, having to with now needing 2 different pressures for your mud weighting. Do you look back at that as maybe why would you drill so deep? Or can you, again, not necessarily making you to defend it, but just explain your logic or rationale about what made you make that decision to kind of risk it a bit going forward?
So we wanted to penetrate enough of the lower Angua to get a reasonable sense of the formation. It is thick. I mean, the lower Angua is over 2,000 meters thick. So it's a lot to, it's a big playground from that perspective. We did pre-drill have some independent pore pressure modeling done, using Mukuyu-1 as a calibration from the pressure data that we had there, and we weren't predicting mud weights that were needed this high. So it was no no kind of no one's fault. It's just this is wildcat exploration in an undrilled formation where encountering overpressure gas is a good thing. It's not I think it wasn't our intention, to kind of get into that scenario where we had to go into a well control situation. But you've got to deal with it with what happens. So yeah, we didn't have in the final hole section that we drilled from sort of, I think it was about 3,400 meters odd, before we TD'd. We didn't have we had that pulsar failure, so we didn't have any real-time measurements either, which handicapped us. So we would have had and we had pressure while drilling, monitoring tools, real-time tools that would have helped that situation. But because of those failures, again, we would have stopped earlier if we'd had that available to us. But instead, we had to be reactive to the situation.
That provides a lot of clarity for me. Maybe I'm just slow to the uptake, but that provides a lot of clarity for me. But maybe just return to the sidetrack here. Thank you, Scott. Just a couple of questions left, and I'll give it back to Jamie to continue the interrogation. Just confirmation on tools. Are all required tools that you have on site and wish to be down hole, are they working ready to go?
Yeah, so all of the primary tools are there. As you said, we've had the CMR looked at, and we've got a primary and a backup. They mobilized a backup, which wasn't available before. Both of them are good to go. The typical quad combo, those are fairly bulletproof tools. You very rarely see any issues with those, and we've run them successfully in every single section in the well so far. We've got a redundancy from a sampling perspective as well. We've got a number of tools available to us that we can fall back to, but no kind of reserves of each of them. We've got primary tools for each of them, but no backups. But we've got a kind of we've got a plan as to how we're going to use each of them if we need to. Hopefully we can all get it done on the one. And I think, from our first sampling run, if we didn't have the differential sticking with the wireline cable, we would have been done and dusted already. But dusted, don't read anything into that. We would have been finished the operations by now, and we would have, everyone would have been celebrating. So we would have had samples. We would have been able to, to stay on the wall and clean up to get representative fluid samples. And we'd all be celebrating. But we've had to kind of, deal with the situation as it's unfolded, and you've got to make decisions to, as to how to best achieve your objectives at that point in time. I think, and as the saying goes, no battle plan survives first contact, and particularly when you're wildcatting.
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott. And so I think that this will be my last one here, and I'll pass it off to Jamie to discuss the issues and solutions, I guess, is the name of our category for that. But last one here is, and I guess, assuming worst case scenario and sample can't be brought to surface and to get that discovery, what's your next steps and what's your contingency plan from here?
Yeah. So again, we've thought this through, and for the section that we're planning to drill now, we can run the 7-inch liner and perforate that and go cased hole sampling for that operation, and we've got the tools to do that. And then, depending on if we have the tools that are still available, then we can also then just flow test it, perforate it, and clean it up and flow it to surface. So do a kind of conventional DST. So there are a number of kind of backup plans if the primary plan from a wireline sampling perspective
Nope.
doesn't go according to plan.
Perfect. And so Jamie, I'll pass it off to you and then let you kind of lead the way here again.
Good. Just reading the questions. I think you've addressed quite a lot of them. What measures are in place to kind of reduce the amount of damage to the tools? Because they've probably been whacked around a bit, being pipe conveyed. So you mentioned before that some of the issues are more to do with essentially like software, as it were, like how the tool's being used rather than a physical problem with the tool being broken. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we've had a kind of combination of issues with software and physical damage to some of the tools. So we've got the software stuff sorted out now, where they're confident with that, and they went through the kind of the firing sequence, and they can simulate that, and they've got it working in the borehole environments well within the kind of operating conditions for the CMR. As I said, the quad combo, gamma ray, PIX, HRLA, that's a resistivity tool. Density neutrons pretty bulletproof from they're pretty robust tools. FMI, that perform well, and we've got a very good FMI data set through most of the original borehole. We've got from a sampling perspective, we've got both formation pressures and fluid sampling tools available, so we don't have to kind of burn everything on one run and one shot. We've got and then we've got, from a Sidewall core perspective, we've got the XL rock, which are the big boy cores, and then we've got the normal MSCT, which are the kind of smaller ones as well. So we've got redundancy from that, and then sonic data. We've got good data through most of the hole, apart from the bottom sort of 300 meters from the mother bore. So we'll have something to calibrate the seismic to if we don't get a VSP, but that's a pretty low chance. So we've got enough redundancy from all of those tool sets and all of the things that we're looking to data that we're looking to capture. So, but the main thing is I think from a tool preservation perspective is ensuring that there's no overbalance in the hole, or only an appropriate amount of overbalance from how you should drill a well, and then a more vertical borehole, which obviously makes running the tools in easier, and doing it on wireline, which will, and then the wireline standoffs that we've mobilized that should arrive I think tomorrow or Thursday, which will be ready in time for the wireline run to keep the cable away from the borehole and minimize the tools that are going to be stationary for a long time on the borehole wall, so that your sampling and your sidewall cores typically that sit there for long periods of time from getting stuck. So, and we've taken all the measures that we need to ensure success.
You mentioned in the webinar during the Q&A about prioritizing the sample retrieval over the basic wireline tools. Is that still a plan?
That's right. So we have changed up the order in which we're going to run the tools and what data we're going to require prior to sampling. So in the motherboard, we had sampling planned as run number 4, and in this one it'll be run number 2 after we get the kind of basic data. And then we also had periods where we had to repeat the acquisition because we had those hold up depths at the towards the base of the lower angler. So the sampling tools went in the hole much later than planned, whereas now we're going to get them in second, which is basically the earliest opportunity that you have to do it.
Are you looking at reducing the amount of kind of wiping you have to do? Because obviously that caused issues in the first well.
Yeah, it will, and wiper trips are okay if your mud weight is fine and you're not overbalanced, because as soon as when you do a wiper trip, you've got your bit that will scrape against the side of the borehole and remove the filter cake, and if it's overbalanced compared to your formation pressure, it's going to result in more invasion. If your mud weight is correct, it's not going to be as much of a problem. So that's probably the key thing, as opposed, yes, you want to minimize wiper trips prior to that, but also it's the internal borehole conditions and the mud weight that's going to, I think, have more to do with the impacts of a wiper trip.
Sampling itself, is there like a bare minimum kind of sample volume or amount that you have to bring to the surface in order to meet the discovery criteria?
No, as long as it's representative from the reservoir. But I mean, you get them in the sample bottle sizes, because you pump it through and you pump it into the chamber until it's pressurized, and then you close the valve. So you just need one from that perspective. But typically you take redundant samples just in case. So what we want to do is get at least one set from the upper angler and one set from the lower angler.
Would that be both at the same time? I know you were also asked about doing, kind of sampling as you go, not LWD, but once you have one wireline sample, trip out, get the sample, say, look at this, and then carry on.
Yeah, it will depend on the borehole conditions. So if the borehole conditions are fine and we're not seeing any stickiness in the hole, then you're fine to continue on, and do that. So it's you've got to kind of suck it and see as to how the borehole conditions are before you make that decision.
Okay, but I know you said this before, prioritize sample retrieval from the sidetrack well. I know people are going to kill me if I don't ask this. If this doesn't work, would you be willing to look at using an LWD sample tool for the next sidetrack if you do have to do one?
No, I think we would go to the plan that we perforate and do. So we'd run the liner and probably perforate and do case hole, just because we'd have to mob one of those sampling tools from God knows where. I don't even know what's available globally from a sampling whilst drilling perspective. From a time and cost perspective, it'll be cheaper to run the liner and do case hole than it will be to sidetrack again.
Okay, I guess we won't dwell on that. If you were to go in the deeper section, the 7-inch casing, do you have the tools for that, like slim hole tools?
Yeah, we've got everything. So again, we've got another suite of wireline tools that are designed for 6-inch hole. So we've got everything we need for the 8.5, and then we've got another suite of the 6 inch. So we've got bits, we've got 3.5-inch drill pipe, we've got and the 5-inch wireline tools for 6-inch hole. It is a bit trickier doing it in 6-inch hole because your clearance in the borehole. Imagine a 5-inch outer diameter of your tools versus a 6-inch ID of your borehole. It's a pretty tight fit. So that doesn't. It's not ideal to do it. People do it all the time, but it's just a little bit more risky in terms of clearance of your tools.
Okay.
But we've got all of that. The well side.
I think he's kind of answered most of the other questions. Matthew, if you wanted to take over. I just have one more about the lab location. Where are you sending stuff? Is that Aberdeen, Houston, Australia?
We've got a combination of labs. So we've got Aberdeen, Norway, and Houston.
Okay, Norway, like Stavanger.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, to be honest. Some of the core analysis work has been sent over there for something or other. Most of it gets done in Aberdeen, and then the geochem stuff gets done in Houston.
Okay. And then just to go back to the salinity samples, you're sending those to the lab to be analyzed before doing any further work on the petrophysics. Is that right? Or are you able to use your on-site tools?
I guess we've reduced our uncertainty range of what our formation salinity is, at least in the Pebbly Arcos. So that's kind of narrowed the possibilities of what the range of salinities are. So it has, but to get an actual number that you use in your petrophysics. So we'll use a combination of ranges, and you can use things like picket plots for those, the petrophysics minded. That in conjunction with that, so we've got a rough idea of where we think it is. But again, we've only seen that in the Pebbly Arcos, whether we've got the same formation water and salinity in the upper Angler and the lower Angler is another story. So because we haven't seen any water legs in those formations yet.
Yeah.
So that's probably an important caveat that we just need to put there, that we've got a sample from a unit above, but it's not necessarily representative of what's below, but at least it's more information than we had previously.
Do you have how many petrophysicists do you have? I'm just wondering, because it looks like you're dealing with these shaly sands, sandy shales by petrophysics, where it gets kind of difficult.
It is, and that's why. So we've got a stable of them now through this group that we've brought in out of the UK, and they've done, there are a lot of, and in fact one of the guys I used to work with at Woodside, funnily enough, when he was introduced on so that was a nice little trip down memory lane. So there's a stable of them now that support us, not only doing the log evaluation, but also the real-time operations, and guys who've got experience in similar depositional environments. That they've done all of Tullows. They do, I think, all of Tullows work exclusively from a petrophysics point of view in these kind of rift basin settings. So in Uganda and Kenya, so they're bringing a lot to that aspect, as well as supporting our internal petrophysicist who's been doing all our work so far. So they've got domain specialists who look at different tools, and they're experts on those particular tools themselves. So they help with the setup of designing the program, looking at the QA/QC. We've got it also on top of that. We've got an independent QA/QC group that have been watching the assembly of the tools, the running of them, and that's been a huge change for us for this campaign compared to the last one. It would have been very tough without them at the well site policing everything as well. So I think again, probably one of the big learnings here is that you just can't trust anyone to do anything properly. You've got to police it and be on top of every single detail. You've got to micromanage everything. You can't leave service companies to their own devices. As sad as that statement is, I think we've had experience of that now multiple times, and now can't leave anything to chance.
Okay. Matthew?
Thanks, Jamie. And thank you, Scott.
Matthew, I think you're muted. Oh.
Sorry, Matthew, your mic's just...
That shouldn't be.
Oh, there we go.
Now.
Can you hear me? Sorry, gents. I'm not sure what's
Yep.
going on. There's some tech difficulties. People are clamoring for me to ask this of you. This is a follow-up clarification, so apologies if it's repetitive. But you discussed, right, if in the case that M2 sidetrack fails, case hole sampling and then the DST post liner is to be done. Is that immediately afterwards? You would just transition straight into that?
Yeah, so we can run the liner. We could do the case hole because we've got the tools there. So that would be the plan. A well test would take, as we said, we're planning to test this anyway next year. So regardless of this result, whether we get a sample or not from here, if we test it, we're going to get it to flow. So, and we can see that from the logs, I think people need to just use a little bit of common sense that we had gas seeping into the wellbore when we had heavy mud in there. So you remove the mud to flow test it, and it's going to flow. So that's a kind of very layman explanation of that aspect of it. But well testing will take some time to mobilize the appropriate equipment to conduct it safely and properly. It's not just flow it up the well and divert it to the flare pit. That's a very dangerous and agricultural approach.
Okay, no, thank you. And so, I mean, we're on the topic of discovery here. We are almost, can you believe it? We're actually kind of trailing to the end here, which is amazing. We're only barely over an hour and a half in, or barely an hour and a half in here. But so, assuming this concept discovery, right, of discovery, and so assuming that you can recover samples, and of course, hopefully from multiple zones, can you do that analysis on site, or do you have to send backups to lab? I mean, what can be done on site in terms of the work that has to be done?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we've seen it already with the cleanup and that print that we put out of the cleanup in the upper Angua, where it shows gas flowing through the fluid analyzer, the compositional fluid analyzer, and then also that slug of condensate or light oil that we got through there, and I went through that in the webinar. So once you clean up and you get a more representative fluid sample, so we still had some filtrate in there that needed to be cleaned up, and it needed to sort of stabilize from a pressure point of view and a cleanup point of view to get a representative sample. So we get a lot of information from that process of whilst we are cleaning up the fluid, we can see, once it stabilizes, what the composition of that is. So we'll be able to get a kind of condensate gas ratio from that. Not a composition like what we got at from the surface, from that sample that we pulled out, and the reason being is that those gas samples that you take that are under high pressure, and to release that is you can't do it at the well site. It's got to go to the lab and be done with specific equipment to do it. What we can do is blow it down. You blow it down into another pressurized chamber to get the liquids drop out, and that'll hopefully be the little trophy that we have at the end, which is what I went back for a few weeks ago, because we were anticipating that was pretty close, and we had again these cascading events that overtook us sadly. So we won't get a full compositional analysis, because the equipment on site only does kind of C1 to C5 plus. It doesn't do beyond that. The compositional fluid analyzer will give us a better ratio of what those heavy components are. So we'll be able to tell you what the primary phase is, whether it's gas condensate or whether it's a volatile oil with a high GOR, and maybe some ratios as well, a GOR or gas oil ratio or CGR condensate gas ratio. But beyond that, it's got to go to the lab to get analyzed to get a full compositional suite done, I think. But also importantly, from a fluid sample perspective, we already got some gas to surface. Although it's residual gas, it has been charged, and it is from those source rocks. So, and it's thermogenic, which means it's generated not by bacteria but by source rocks. So, from that perspective, we proved that we can do it. We had it flowing through the tools in the upper Angua under much more difficult borehole and sampling conditions. So, we execute the sidetrack right, we'll get it done.
And so can we anticipate, you've already touched on this, but I think just for clarification and have this done, but can we expect the gross net pay, gross to net pay ratio, net pay estimations, in whatever coming, imminent hypothetical discovery, that will be part of that announcement.
Yeah, it will be, and it's required under, from a listing rules perspective, you have to release the net pay. But as I said, ours, because of the limited amount of information that we have at the moment, it's going to be a conservative number. So, and you saw this, probably Uganda is a good example, from Tullow when they started, and with Hardman. So Warrego was the second, Imputa was the first discovery. 12 meters of net pay in that. Warrego was 26 and Kingfisher was like 40 initially from when they first gathered the data. Subsequently, when they had it analyzed and could calibrate all of their logs, those numbers went up. So, and then you flow test it again and you see which stuff will actually contribute. That maybe you've got an arbitrary kind of cutoff from a numbers point of view, that says 60% gas saturation is your net cutoff, for example. But in these rocks, it may be lower. Some basins, it's like 40. So it just depends. You need to be able to calibrate your rocks from what you can measure with the tools versus what's going to flow and contribute over a production time frame. And those are, you don't know that on your first the first time you put some logs in the hole. So
no, thank you. And so, I mean, you mentioned the flow testing, and I think that this is, again, something that you've touched on before, and I know that there's a lot of hypothetical, moving parts that are difficult to make any accurate, assessment or judgment or prediction. But right now, is it your prediction of NQ1 for that flow test for M2, assuming success? Is that still kind of what you're targeting, or what's your goal?
No, we said Q2, so that's what we're targeting. So that'll be kind of post rainy season. We've still got to go out and order the long leads, mobilize equipment. It does take a long time, being remote, to do all of this. All the planning is going on in the background now with a lot of those vendors and service providers. So that is in progress, but it does take a while to mobilize, get contracts sorted out, for them to figure out where the equipment's going to come from. And that's one of the other things that we've been doing to make our lives simpler as well, is meeting with all of the service companies to say, look, we can't continue in this manner of gathering tools from all over the region, all over the globe, and trying to coordinate them arriving all at once, and all of the different export procedures that have got to be followed from wherever the tools are coming from, and sometimes you're going through multiple borders to get it to us where we are. So we need them now so we propose a better operating model for us where they're going to consolidate everything in one or two ports so that we can go and pick it up all at once. That's going to reduce our kind of schedule creep that we have, where we've got to wait. Or you just need one thing not to turn up, and 10,000 other things have turned up, and it puts your whole program back whilst you're waiting for that one piece of kit to arrive. So we're now able to go to the service provider and say, we need this model for it to work for us, if you want to work for us. And with long-term work in the basin and multi-well, multi-year campaigns, there's a bigger prize for them now, and an incentive to do it.
Well, I think this is a decent transition again here. We're just kind of circling the end of just a bit of a grab bag right now that we've kind of transitioned out of the immediate day-to-day operations. On that, you talk about people that are interested potentially in having part of this, or coming to the party with you. I mean, kind of a two-part thing here on this question of farm outs, and this one I thought is interesting. We've talked about this before, but I thought it was just a good way to phrase it from the person who sent it in. But rather than this trying to create an objective, impossibly to create an objective sort of approach to what a farm and partner needs, maybe the turning it around on what wickets do you want to clear before accomplishing that, right? In your own mind, what's your checklist, and what's remaining on that checklist before you start shopping for what you deem to be fair value?
Look, it's a really good question, and there's no right answer to it, and it depends on I think ultimately you've got to look at your end game is probably, maybe an appropriate term. There's probably a few chapters before you get to that end game. But ultimately, what do you want to do? Do you want to take it all the way through to production? Do you want to operate? Do you not want to operate? Do you want to farm out or development to a bigger party that's going to take over operatorship? Do you want to monetize the whole thing entirely if you get the right offer? And there are attractions for all of those options, and I think trying to engineer something for all three of those options is hard. From a value perspective, obviously, the deeper you go from an appraisal perspective and prove up the resource, de-risk the basin and the remaining prospectivity, the higher up the value curve that you can go from that perspective. So it's a combination of value and risk for an incoming party as to ultimately what kind of metrics you're going to get on a deal, whether it's from an M&A perspective or from a farming perspective. So it is a balancing act to doing that, and there's no perfect answer to do it. But I think at a minimum, given the nimbleness that we can operate at and the speed that we can operate at versus some of the kind of typical partners, would see us at least continue to operate through the next couple of years in the appraisal phase before they get whilst they get their feet under the table and used to the operating environment in Zimbabwe, dealing with remote logistics and everything else. Bringing in a bigger partner will also help, in terms of being able to leverage against better deals for service companies, for suppliers, commercial terms. So there's pros and cons depending on what stage you're talking about, and I think we're going to continue on a path that we think is going to generate the most value. I think we've taken a lot of risk off the table already. Obviously, we've proven a petroleum system in the basin. Looks like we've got a very nice discovery on our hands here from the upper and the lower Angler, and that's got to come then with the rest of the running room that we have in the basin. We haven't even talked about the basin margin play yet, the further prospectivity in the east. So there's a big portfolio that we have now that has space for incoming partners. The license setup that we have, we've got separate permits which we can deal separately as well. That's given us a little bit of flexibility too, so we don't have to kind of do a deal on the entire acreage position, although most companies will probably want the whole thing, but it does allow us to maybe tailor something a little bit different too.
Interesting, and I like that you can split it up. That's an interesting little detail there. One final thing on the farm out here, and not to belabor the point too much, and this is one of those ones where I know that I can't expect a clear and direct answer, but can you provide any color or context just in terms of the activity on that front? I mean, do you have more partners coming up? I mean, the data room that's coming up, that is there increased interest? Have you seen any movement in terms of just the quantity or quality or seriousness of potential partners?
Yeah, so I think, as I stated earlier this year, when the new board came together, so that was John Bentley, our new chairman, and Robin Sutherland, our non-exec. One of the first things on the agenda post Mukuyu-1 was, all right, are we going to go through a farm out process to bring in someone for Mukuyu-2 and the forward work program, or are we going to to back ourselves given what we've seen so far in Mukuyu-1 and go and do it again? And unanimously we said we're going to go and do it again because we think we can generate much better value. So at that stage we had some interested parties, but we've actually shut the data room. I shut it down. I deactivated it. I wanted to stop paying money for it. But also we didn't want the distraction for our technical team, who were trying to still absorb all the Mukuyu-1 data, do all the planning for Mukuyu-1, shooting seismic. So running a farm out process is intensive. You've got to have all your material and have it updated with all the Mukuyu-1 data that we were still digesting at that point. And so the decision was made that, we'll revisit it when the time is right but that's not to say that we don't have inquiries and people wanting to come and look at it. So that's still ongoing. But at the moment, we've kind of pumped the brakes on that front until we're ready to do it. And we're still a small team, but we've brought in now more people on the technical front, and we can start to, once we get this done, we can start to build out the team, and we can have some more resources to spend more time doing that kind of stuff and prepping data in the background, whilst the guys have been at the forefront and generating all the exploration ideas and know it as intimately as anyone, or there's no one else who does it as much as our team, can focus on delivering that forward exploration plan rather than a kind of farm out process. So we can kind of put that, bring in some extra resources to help on that side once we're ready.
Again, I think Jamie, go.
If you looked at farming out the farm out process, like you have companies like Envoy, others that handle it, or is that just not an expense you want right now, or a headache? You'd rather do.
It's not so much the expense. It's the headache, because they, we did have Envoy and they did a very good job, and through the farm out process, it also forces you to be very rigorous in your technical work, your presentations, and the cohesiveness of your story, because it's being tested by people who are looking to put holes in it. So when you're doing it, if you're just doing it for internal purposes, it doesn't need to be a final and polished thing, because you've got all these ideas in your head, and you can articulate that to your team when you're sitting across the table. But during a farm out process, when they're in a data room looking at material, you have to get everything across in the right manner with the right context, and have to have a cohesive story for everything. Otherwise, your argument falls apart and you look foolish. So it does
time sink as well.
It's a massive time.
I remember doing data rooms. You have one company per day. You can burn through a month easily without doing any other work.
Yeah. No, it's hugely time consuming, and we've got ops to focus on at the moment. So that was the decision that was made. So even though you have a third party running it, you're still very involved in the process, and really they're just kind of prepping or sprucing up the management presentations and fielding the inquiries. But you've still got to ultimately, sit with them, present, do the follow-ups, handhold them through the data and interpretation. So it's still a very time-consuming process.
Right. It also helps to have a fixed target to farm out. You don't want to be, when there's so many unknowns, you don't want to be adding stuff on constantly, or without a fixed goal in mind. So it's certainly worth taking the time to take a step back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matthew.
No, thank you, Jamie. Appreciate the interlude there. Just a couple. I mean, we are kind of pointing to the future, I suppose, right? And I think this is a question that people always appreciate hearing their responses to, or some of these, right? And the one that I'm just starting with the more macro before we get into the devilish details. But in light of recent knowledge increases, right? In light of the data, in light of how things have transpired and transgressed over the last few months, has your approach changed? Your 6, 12, 24 month, your targets that you have in your mind. What has anything changed in terms of that because of, or based on what's come out of the ground for knowledge?
I don't think it's. I don't think the kind of the strategy or the goals have changed per se. I think we've always been. We've articulated what we're trying to do with this and get after it very quickly post success, which we're on the verge of at the moment, and trying to get this to a monetization point very early on, rather than taking a big company approach and drilling out the resource. Let's go and prove up 10 TCF before we go and try and sell a single molecule of gas to anyone, and then a full field development plan that's gold plated and it's going to take 10 years before you see a drop of it flow. That's not our approach. So we're still looking at trying to go into a kind of early pilot scheme post Mukuyu-2 as a proof of concept. I think what may evolve a little bit is where we go next with the drill bit, whether we're going to go and test some of the targets in the east, and that we should get the final data package for that very, very shortly. I think we've got the pre-stack time data already there, and we're just waiting for the pre-stack depth migration data now, so that we can start doing the interpretation in anger. Or we're going to go and test a basin margin play prospect, or the plan for Mukuyu next year is 3D, which does present some complications in terms of shooting 3D and drilling at the same time, just because of the sensitivity of noise and where we are. So we've got the well that we're going to drill next year. We're going to have to decide on once we've had a look at this CB23 2D data that we get in. But beyond that is going to be multi-wells in Mukuyu, and then if we unlock a new prospect or a new in the east on trend with Mukuyu or the basin margin play, then we've got some more decisions to make as to I guess how we attack it, but always with the goal in mind that we want to be able to try and monetize this as quickly as possible. We don't want to end up in a situation like they did in Uganda, where oil was discovered in 2005, 2006 by Hardman. Still not a drop produced today. It'll only come on stream sometime in 2026. So that's 20 years later. I mean, that's not why. That doesn't get me excited. But more to that, I think the experience and I mean the changes that we made to the team this year. We've got a new drilling manager who is absolutely superb. I mean, he's just been world class. Didn't work with him, but worked alongside him and was very highly regarded. When he spent most of his career in Africa, and dynamic guy on the same wavelength, and his idea of how we wanted and he came in kind of very late to the piece before we could make many changes to the operating model from a drilling perspective. But he's now been preparing that in the background, so that in the future we're going to be much better set up from an efficiency point of view, a cost point of view. I mean, just some of the changes that we made for this first well, that 12.25 inch section that we drilled. Firstly, the 17.5 inch section, we did that in a day versus 5 days with Mukuyu-1. The 12.25 inch section we did in 3.5 days versus 12 days in the previous well. So we were tracking way ahead of schedule early on in the well. And these are the incremental changes that we're going to be making. Some of them will be evolutionary, and some of them, I think, particularly for this next whole section, well design, casing points, and equipment, will be more of a revolution than an evolution for the 8.5 inch hole and deeper, now that we know a bit more. So that will change a little bit as well. But the kind of the 30,000 foot view, as you like to call it, hasn't really shifted much. I think we're still very keen on pursuing that early monetization path.
No, excellent. And so we're going to switch gears here abruptly from the 30,000 feet down to ground level. So, I mean, as of your previous news release, it said 21 to 28 days we can expect sidetrack completion. Is that still, you're still on pace for that?
Yeah, still on target for that at the moment. So,
okay, excellent. And so this is going to be one maybe a little bit. This might be a little bit chewy at times here. Order of events, I guess, and because there's just there's a lot of, obviously, and this is a good problem to have as you kind of referenced, but you have a lot of options moving forward in terms of where you can go next, right? And I think that maybe what some people are hoping to hear clarification on with the 6-inch, extension, is this going to be part of the current campaign? Will you be returning to that to complete that right now, or is that just an ace in the pocket or ace in the hole to be used later now?
no, so that'll come. So we won't we're very unlikely to drill 6-inch hole in this current campaign. The reason being is we're coming back to test Mukuyu-2 next year, and that will become more efficient to do it then because we want to do it open hole. So drill it, evaluate it, and then perforate it and test it in open hole, and do that once. If we drill it now, we then are going to be forced to plug and abandon that open hole section for 6-inch, and then we're going to have to sidetrack and drill that out again anyway next year. So we've got enough log data at the moment to be happy with what we've seen, that from an operational point of view, it's just cheaper, more efficient to do that next year as part of the well test campaign where we've got all the equipment there and line everything up properly than to do it now.
No, excellent. Thank you.
So we're going to get part of the lower angua for this, and then where we have the overpressure, we can drill that out next year and then test that separately, and then do it from bottom up, which is your kind of traditional and easiest method of doing it.
And so again, just jumping around here, we're kind of rotating around to the end, but the actual rig contract, I mean, are you looking to continue the retention? Has that been locked in, or where's the status on that?
Yeah, so there'll be some news on that very shortly.
Okay. and so we'll just, does it actually have, so here's the one that you could probably answer then. Do you have the capacity with your current rig to drill out the lower angua at a decent gauge in the deeper sections, or do you require a larger rig later on?
No, so I mean we got to 4,000 meters, or 3,918, I think, in Mukuyu-1, highly deviated well, so much trickier. So in 6-inch hole we can get beyond 4,000 meters, no problem.
Excellent. And yeah, just to kind of continue with these little quick one-offs. When might we expect 2D seismic data to be released?
So we just, as I said, we've just got in the pre-stack time migration data, and we're waiting for the pre-stack depth migration data, which takes a bit more processing. That will be interpreted over the Christmas and New Year period and be ready sometime in Q1. And again, when that'll line up with us making decisions about where we're going to go to next, well pad prep, contracts, timing, etc. So we do need some time to interpret the data first. We don't just get it back from the processing and we have an answer. It's and then we're also going to be using the data from Mukuyu-2 and the sonic data and the VSP to help calibrate that as well. So that'll all feed in, and then merging the three data sets, seismic data sets that we have now. So the mobile data set, the CB21 survey, and the CB23 survey to give and relook at everything in the portfolio so that we can risk and rank all of the other prospectivity to determine where we're going to go next.
And
how quick is your well planning process? My experience is offshore mainly, where it takes like 2 years. But obviously, you've pulled this one around in
so with Mukuyu-1, we shot that seismic and we finished that in November 2021. And our well design was done in the space of about a couple of months, probably, from when we had the initial interpretation from the subsurface team, picking the horizons where we wanted to, thought we needed to put the casing string. So that initial well was vertical. Then when we started to do get some of the fancier products from the seismic, and we saw that dandy seismic response, we then changed it to a deviated well on the fly. But we were flexible in our well design approach, where we ordered enough casing and had enough contingency plan that we could do that, because again, we didn't, it's all well and good planning a well, but in an undrilled basin, you're going to get surprises, good and bad. So I think again, this is the kind of traditional big company approach, where you're looking at a 2-year cycle from when you first design a well. It's got to go through millions of reviews and peer reviews, and to what you can do onshore, which is again a lot easier because you're not dealing with seabed surveys, with currents, with mid-ocean conditions. Rig contracting as well is a big part of it, which you're not going to contract a rig until you've got your well design sorted out. So when we went out to look for a rig, we wanted to make sure that we knew what the capabilities that we needed to drill the kind of wells that we needed to do early on for this basin. So with our well designs now, we're refining that. There'll be some changes for the next wells, and I think we're going to be pushing the casing shoes deeper, and we know we can do that now. But it's not going to fundamentally change the well design. It's just going to be deeper casing points rather than anything else, and probably moving to rotary steerables now instead of mud motors, which have been very unreliable for us. So and just give us enhanced flexibility for directional work if we need to do it from and again, just from a kind of bottom hole cutting perspective, also just new generation tools which are much better than older gen mud motors. So it's probably not so much the well design; it's just picking the well location. For us, that's probably the crucial thing. And from a civils perspective, building a well pad, I mean, we can knock those out in 6 weeks now. We've got environmental approval across our entire license areas. We can go and drill wells and shoot seismic anywhere we want to. So that has vastly shortcut the amount of time that you typically need in a planning process. I mean, here in Australia, trying to get a well drilled with the red tape and the green tape you've got to go through, and the lack of rig availability in the Perth Basin, where there are 2 rigs, which you've got those under long-term contracts, it's quite hard to get a slot. So again, we've taken this approach with Exalo and the rig, where we're securing that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of timing, and we've worked out very, very cheap standby rates to make sure that makes sense, rather than mobing and demobbing a rig in and out of the country. So it's become a win-win for us in Exalo in that respect. They can see a lot of long-term work coming up, and they're a good company to work with, and it allows us to have, I guess, if you don't have a rig, then you're wasting your time. So planning wells, so that has given us a lot of flexibility and the ability to kind of do things a lot quicker than you ordinarily would be able to.
I'll jump back in here, Jamie, if you're good. And Scott, we're just again kind of final topic here, and thank you again for always your patience with this. Final topic though is kind of the classic one that we always have to ask, and so I mean, just the price tag for some of these things, right? So I mean, the flow testing, and then the 6-inch extension. Do you have even just very general ballpark numbers on price tag for that?
Yeah, I mean, 6-inch deepening. When you're doing it as part of a campaign, and you've mobilized all the tools there, the additional incremental cost is actually relatively modest, compared to, as I said, the thing that costs us the most amount of money is mobilizing equipment and the day rates for it. And we're going to be able to work up better day rates for long. When you're doing it in a single well campaign, it is very expensive to do it as a proportional cost if you're not amortizing it over a number of wells. So when we're starting to put together bigger campaigns next year, that becomes a much more modest cost to do it. Well testing, we're working that out now from a cost perspective at the moment, and it will depend on the number of zones you have and the type of test that you're going to be doing. So I think the kind of layman understanding of a well test is that you just float to surface and you just want to look at the rate and then that's it. But well testing is done for a few reasons. Flow rate's obviously important, but you're looking also at if you're going to do a full-blown proper well test, where you're running gauges down the hole to look at the pressure build-up and response when you're flowing it, and then when you shut it in, which is, from an analysis perspective, is the more important thing, and what you gather the most data out of, to watch how your far field reservoir behaves and how the reservoir is recharging towards the well bore, I beg your pardon. Whether you're seeing any boundaries, the kind of connected volumes that you're seeing. So from a material balance point of view, what you've got in your reservoir, and you can measure what you take out, and then the pressure change in that response will give you an idea as to what is there originally. Sometimes you can't take enough out to make a meaningful dent in it, which is the result that you're looking for. Probably the simplest way I can explain a well test and what you're trying to achieve, besides the flow rates, and you measure those and you're doing it at different choke rates to see how it responds to a change in your surface pressure where you open it up and allow more flow to happen, and how your downhole pressure and flow rates change. But from the information that you're trying to gather from a well test, if you imagine standing next to a swimming pool, that's an odd shape. So you're never going to get a square reservoir. That just nature doesn't bless us with those. And you throw a rock into the middle of the pool, and you watch the waves come out from where the rock lands in and makes a splash. So if you imagine that splash as your initial flow rate, and then you're watching those pressure waves go out towards the edge of the pool. And then if you imagine you've got a gauge where you threw that rock downhole, and then you're watching those pressure waves come back to that gauge, and you're looking at those changes in pressure as that happens. Now, some areas, depending on the shape of your pool and where you've thrown the rock, are going to hit the side sooner than the others, and you're going to get a convoluted pressure response back to you as the waves come from different angles of the pool back towards where you threw the rock. And that's you've got to go through something called deconvolution to unpack all of that data. And well testing and interpretation is a whole nother specialist area in itself. But that tells you how far away are my faults. If you don't see that pressure response come back, or very little, then you've got to, you haven't hit a boundary on the side, and that's hopefully what you're looking for. A big connected volume of gas that then doesn't send those responses, or a very, very tiny response back to the pressure gauge, because you haven't actually pulled that much out from a volumetric perspective. So you're designing well tests to gather that sort of data, not just flow rates, because it tells you a whole bunch more than just what is my well going to flow at. So we've got to, once we've done the analysis, we've also got to look at if there's any compositional fluid difference between our reservoirs. So that's why we want to try and get a few different samples from a few different reservoirs to see what that relationship is as well, because that'll tell you about compartmentalization from a geological time perspective. So how we design that well test and how many zones we're going to have and what type of test we do will determine the cost of it. So we're working through that at the moment, and once we figured out how we're going to test it and what tests we're going to do and which zones we're going to do, then we'll be able to come up with a cost.
Fair.
But typically it's in the order of, once you moved your equipment there and everything is there, depending on the time, you're probably looking at 3, 5, 8 million, depending on the number of zones and the amount of time and your shut-in periods and however long.
No, thank you. And so this actually, I'm going to take a half step back because you caught something that obviously you said something caught my ear, but I think it actually ties in nicely if you'll just kind of give me some rope to run with it. But so bigger campaigns, I can't help but notice that you mentioned that. Do you want to just, is there anything you can kind of mention on that front?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a huge portfolio from an exploration point of view, which is going to require bigger campaigns, and we don't want to. And I think what we want to do here, obviously, prove up a discovery in Mukuyu-2. That will then unlock a range of funding options for us to undertake bigger campaigns, which is what we want to do to help, as we were talking about earlier, drive the value of the asset and the company up. Because as we're taking more risk off the table and proving up a bigger resource base, the value is going to grow. And we've seen, I mean, everyone kind of understands that point. But also putting multi-well and bigger campaigns together is much more efficient from a planning perspective, from a cost perspective, and from an information gathering perspective as well. So, our idea is, I think, from an exploration perspective, go and extend the play either east of Mukuyu, where we've just shot some new seismic, or open one of the basin margin prospects. So that's the exploration side of things. And then on the appraisal side of things, go and start drilling out Mukuyu, and going. We've had a big step out from this one. 7K is pretty sizable, but it's still a huge structure. It's 200 square kilometers under closure. So we've got a lot more to go and prove up. And then, it goes to the strategy question as to whether do you drill in the same fault block and try and prove that connectivity from a communication perspective between that, so that you can start building up a contingent resource base within a kind of discrete area that would allow you to get it to a reserves perspective and a development perspective on a smaller basis? Or do you just go and kind of step out as far as you can to prove fault blocks that may not be in communication, but prove that the resource is pervasive over a big area. So we've got to try and figure that out. And once we've integrated the Mukuyu-2 results again with the seismic, and I think we saw the change from Mukuyu-1 to Mukuyu-2 from a structural perspective and our interpretation. So that's also not going to still hold post Mukuyu-2. We're going to have to do some more work and then figure out where we're going to go next. But we've got a much better idea now of what we want to do in Mukuyu. So we'll be drilling. I think the plan is probably 1 exploration well and three wells in Mukuyu, from an appraisal point of view, and we can tie those in with over 24-25. We're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at trying to weatherproof our operations as well, so we can continue going through the rainy season as well, which would prevent that kind of stop and start and logistics and efficiency kind of costs that just eat away at the capital costs of your program unnecessarily. And then also you can get better deals from service companies. You can get better service because we can provide them. We're setting up a new supply base down in the valley now, which has got got everything that everyone needs to operate from, and service tools, so that we're not having to rotate them out of country to get service between wells. So all of this kind of planning is going on in the background.
And so I honestly think that we're nearing the end of this, and the final sort of nest of questions I have for you still is regarding financing. And I think a good way to broach it is this question of your strategy. It's going to be no surprise that, I mean, for a pre-revenue explorer, always used to be raising finances, and of course, I think people understand that this is coming down the pipe for Invictus again. And so maybe the way that I want to ask you this then is that, you have this. I mean, you just said a 4-well program within a 12-month period initially potentially initiating. That's a very ambitious, and I think people would be very excited to hear that as a target. Also ambitious from a financial perspective. And then you have also, so that's the one extreme. On the other extreme is these kind of bits and bytes style financings you've done, $10 million or whatever. And so you could conceivably have a very small, and I mean, I think that, pardon me for a second here, right? But I mean, this accretive dilution is all we can ever hope for, right? Is that you build more value through what you've done with the money that you were provided with, right? And I think that's what we can always that's the best we can hope for. So I mean, is this a thing where the next financing is going to be a small one to get you to the flow test in the spring, or is this where you think that at this point you might be at a stage to take a bigger swing, and then what does that look like?
Yeah, so from a Mukuyu-2 perspective, we kind of had to fund that piecemeal because of what was digestible for the market, and that's the approach that we had to take. We would have liked to have got it all out of the way in one hit, but it would have been, probably a lot more dilutionary than what it ended up being. Market conditions have been tougher over this last year than they were in 2022 and 21. But post success with Mukuyu-2, obviously from a market cap perspective and a value perspective, the value of the company will go up significantly, which then, if you're looking at a traditional equity raise, will reduce the dilution, but we'll have other funding methods available to us as well, as I mentioned in I think some of our previous webinars, where we've got a lot of the Southern African banks that are lining up now, as well as prospective off-takers for gas, particularly on the gas to power side of things, that want to secure feedstock and power and are prepared to invest up front to do that, which will provide us then with the capital to do that as a, if you like, a prepayment or debt facility from some of the banks. So it does open up opportunities to do that without having the same dilutionary impact it does. And I'm very conscious from a dilution perspective. I'm the largest shareholder. I don't want to give away any more than I have to, and dilute myself any more than I have to. So I'm very conscious of it. And so we'll be exploring all of those. And as we've always said, we're going to take what we believe is the best route for our shareholders. And and I think a lot of people have been very short-term focused on some of these, some of these equity raises without kind of realizing where the end goal will get us to from that perspective. And if we'd chosen a farm out route pre-Mukuyu-1, where would we be now? At the mercy of another farm out partner and their timing and gold plating and everything else, from a cost and an efficiency perspective, versus us getting after it, in a true frontier wildcatting sense, where we know we don't have all the answers, and we could go and get more data and study it to death until everyone feels as comfortable as they'll ever get before you go and spin the drill bit. But that's ultimately, you got to go and do it, and that's what we've done. And we've just got the last piece now to complete, and that'll open up a range of funding options for us, which won't come with the dilution. I think that everyone, including me, has been annoyed about, particularly with the capital markets, and sometimes particularly how it's conducted in Australia.
No, and thank you for your candor on that. I think that's obviously, you can imagine that even patient supporters can understand that dilution is, accretive dilution. It happens, and it's a necessary poison, but just it's a conversation that has to happen, right? And so, I mean, and not to belabor the point, but if I may, so if I'm collating what you have and kind of concluding what you've just said, that you're fairly comfortable now with the idea of raising post discovery, which, I mean, again, this is all still a hypothetical imminent, but I mean, it sounds as if that this concept that you are now at, so agonizingly close to, is a larger financing post discovery. Is that's where you're at?
Yeah, and that may not happen all at once. Again, we may do it in stages and tranches as we need to, because again, do you want to take all the funding ahead of 4 wells, or where you think you can build the value and increase it after a couple, and then do it again? That's, I think I know what the answer is from my perspective, but again, it's it's something that we've got to take collectively for decision making as a team and as a board as to what we think is the best route.
Well, honestly, Scott, I think that I thank you for your patience. I think this might be the shortest fireside chat we've ever managed. So I think that's a win on its own. But yeah, no, Jamie.
I think we covered.
Yeah, I think we've
quite a lot.
Yeah, I think so. Jamie, do you have any final questions before I kind of give Scott a chance at a final thought?
No, just thanks for your time and openness.
Yeah, always.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it is a sincere thanks. You are, yeah, your openness and honesty and willingness to deal with us gents here. So, but any final thoughts to you, Scott?
No, again, always a pleasure being on the show and having you guys host it. I think it's something that allows us to kind of delve into more of the contextual stuff around the announcements that we just can't possibly get into, either writing the announcements or hosting kind of company webinars without a moderator and someone pulling this all together. So you guys do an enormous amount of work kind of gathering everyone's thoughts and questions and fears and anxieties together, so that we can sort of discuss it, and I guess give people a little bit more context around it, so that they understand it more. I know we've got a lot of our investors that aren't familiar with the oil and gas space, and so this is a complicated industry. It's and it is you're dealing with things underground that are in a frontier basin that are undrilled before, uncertain. You're dealing with movable fluids, pressure, temperature, and a very complicated logistic situation as well, which kind of compounds our challenges if anything starts to go off plan. So I think we just thank everyone for their patience and understanding. I know everyone's frustrated. Believe me, there's no one who's been banging their head against the wall more than me. But we've got a plan now. The team have done an excellent job, and it's been a Herculean effort, particularly from our drilling team, who have been very, very close to this and been living it all the time and adjusting and adapting to the situation as it comes to light, and that's what we can do, and they've done a very good job so far. Would it be nice if would it be nice? It's good to have overpressure gas in the low angler that's kind of caused us some cascading issues. Or would it be nice if we could have overcome it without having to go to the measures that we needed to control the well, to prevent it from coming back at us? But I think people should take comfort in the fact that we've seen hydrocarbons, one in the Pebliarcos, and that's proven the log response, what we're calculating from a live saturation and movable gas perspective in the upper and the lower angler, seeing it come through the fluid analyzer as well before we had to pull off the wall, and now executing the sidetrack with the appropriate drilling conditions and mud weight. We should get the result that everyone's waiting for and hoping for, and once that happens, then will be transformative for the company and for our shareholders. So, and again, just like to reiterate our thanks on behalf of the company, our team, and the board to all of our shareholders who've supported us through this, what is a pretty mad hat endeavor, frontier wildcatting. I mean, this hasn't happened from a company on on the ASX for decades, and it's a very rare thing, even worldwide. Drilling in an undrilled basin, and that takes to be able to fund that, through our shareholders has been an unbelievable result, and something that I never thought would happen. So I am very, very grateful to everyone who's allowed us to chase this this project and continue and be so supportive and really, really appreciative. So thank you to everyone.
Well, yeah, you've got 10,000 people, 10,000 investors. That's a community all on its own, and maybe you have more than your fair share of village idiots in that crowd, but yourself included in here for me, right? But no, thank you. 10,000 people cheering you on, and maybe hopefully, knock on wood here, right? The next time we won't be agonizing over apparent defeat. We can celebrate incredible victories instead, I suppose, right? So, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jamie, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll call it here. Have a good night, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, James. Thank you, everyone.